Hi everyone, I'm Liana. I'm a quantum hypnotist and intuitive guide and channeler. And I'm going to tell you about some things that's come into my awareness about Earth, our solar system, and our connection to Orion. Um, so if you're in the spiritual community or ancient history, into Egypt, a lot of things, mythology, you know that there's a lot of clues and points to our Earth's connection to Orion. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's come into my awareness that um, kind of explains a little bit about why Earth's template, the lessons that we're here to learn, are the way that they are. If you don't, if you're not familiar with me, if you haven't watched any of my videos, I found out last October that I had an energetic lock on my throat through a messages from your guides and angel session, which is a channeled session that I had done. And that this lock that this lock held information, was keeping information locked up. As I began to explore this more intuitively, figured out that this lock was kind of complicated. It had multiple steps that needed to be done in order to unlock it. And different souls, different humans here on Earth held keys to them. So there were 8 keys that I needed to collect. I have a session on my YouTube that's a Starship healing session where we go to the Syrian, and I get one of the keys back from one of the practitioners in the session. So if you're interested, you can go and listen to that session. But through other things with my guides that would come through about like what I was unlocking, they would say, all, you're unlocking all. And I'd be like, well, what does that mean? You know, it could have different interpretations. I was like, all of me, all of my memories, remembering back to oneness, that could be considered all. And I asked about it in a community that I'm in where they were doing channeled sessions monthly, and you could ask a question. And what came through was all, as well as the big picture about what's been done on Earth and a few other things. So I'm going to tell you about what's come through since I unlocked it, which I unlocked it yesterday. I went back to the Syrian. I used all 8 of my keys at 1:11 p.m. and unlocked this lock. Now, some of this was coming in to my awareness before this because I'm going to be stepping into more public channeling where I'm channeling a divine mother energy, the mother of all creation specifically. So some of this was already coming into my awareness. And I thought, well, I'll just channel this, I'll save this publicly and I'll channel it publicly. But then I realized that I was kind of seeing channeling as a barrier or a mask almost to where I can channel something that's not known and might be a little bit mind blowing and be like, oh, well, that's not coming from me. It's coming from a higher being, which isn't really true. It's connected to you, it's still coming through you. But I was sort of using it as a mask in a way. So I'm telling you about it first, and then more information will come through later, I'm sure. I don't have all the answers. I still have a lot of questions myself. So approach the information with an open mind. It's one piece of the puzzle and allow it to be a possibility in your awareness, even if it doesn't necessarily resonate. And you always choose. You choose what resonates with you, what feels good to you, and that's absolutely fine. So I'm going to connect this to 2 other people who I don't know personally, um, but have a lot of pieces of this puzzle that they talk about. Last week, I do light language on some of my social media pages. And last week, I was tuning in about what serves for light language that day. And what I got was activate the missing ion. And saw that it was connected to Orion. Ion is literally in the name of the star system, Orion. And so I'm connecting this to Matthias DiStefano and Robert Edward Grant, who, if you've watched any of their interviews together, talk about a missing ion. Now, Matthias sees it in Rama's Bridge, the missing ion being Sita, Rama's Bridge being a rainbow bridge. Robert Edward Grant connects it to humans' DNA evolving to a silicone-based DNA, as well as the Isis and Osiris myth. Now, Isis and Osiris are a big part of my soul's journey, and I'll talk about that more in a bit. But Isis and Osiris myth, when Osiris was killed by Set, um, Isis found his body, and then Set cut him into 14 pieces, scattered him around, and then Isis went on a journey to go and collect his pieces, but she could not find one of the 14 pieces, the 14th piece being his phallus. And so the phallus became known, missing 1/14. If you're not familiar with the myth, go and look that up. What some people don't know, and which I have an understanding of because it came through in the Starship session that I mentioned where I go to the Assyrian, is Isis also cut herself apart. Not physically, but she fractaled her energy, her soul, due to the trauma of losing Osiris. And I know that because one of the parts of unlocking this lock was me integrating a piece of Isis that was left in the Assyrian. And if you listen to the Starship session that I'm mentioning, you'll see that we also release Osiris's energy from the Assyrian as well. And during that process, just felt like immense heartbreak. Jan Matthias, Robert Edward Grant, who are talking about the missing ion, which I'm going to come back to a bit later. But when I received that information, I was, well, what's the connection there to Orion? And my guides were like, well, see. And so I regressed myself. I don't think I needed to actually regress myself, but that's the process that I followed. And the first scene I went to, I was a being inside of Alantok, a star in Orion. And it was like a council meeting, but it was hard for me to kind of fully understand what I was seeing. Being inside of a star is kind of disorienting, but it was a council meeting where they were discussing what to do with Orion. And I kept hearing the wars have gone on too long, we're failing, there's too much imbalance between light and dark, we need to ask for help, we're going into a pause, we can form a link, we're going into stasis. And so I was like, okay, they're forming a link, they're going into stasis or hibernation. All right. I go to the next scene and I'm going to like a higher angelic council, or what you would perceive as an angelic council meeting. And they're discussing what to do after Orion, the star system itself, had asked for help. So I'm not talking about the beings on Orion, talking about the planets and the stars of Orion, their consciousness asking for help. And what I heard there was, if the star system's asking for help, then we need to pay attention to that. So, and then I heard, okay, so we'll separate some of it out and we'll give them another chance and see what happens for them to ascend. And then I was asking, well, like, what does what do the planets think about this? Like, do they want to do this? Do they want to be separated? Do they want to go through this process? And got, well, yeah, they want to try again. They're okay with it. So I had the understanding, okay, Earth and our solar system were separated from Orion to be a controlled environment, as well as an environment where we're playing out. So Orion had the Orion Wars, and we know that Earth is connected to Orion, connected to the Orion Wars. It's come through other sources, channelers, that Earth is mirroring the Orion Wars. It's clearing the trauma from the Orion Wars. It's helping Orion heal. But we're actually finishing the Orion Wars. We're not just mirroring them, we're playing them out again on a personal level to where our genetics have been made to mimic or to not mimic, but combine the beings involved in the Orion Wars. We're playing it out on a personal level in a controlled environment as a second chance, as I want to say a haven for Orion, to where we are the missing ion of Orion. We are the missing piece. The second journey after I unlocked the key, what I saw was what we would perceive as higher angelic beings separating out our solar system from Orion. Our pyramids that we know are connected to Orion being linked to the pyramids on Orion or in Orion as a monitor of our progress on Earth, the frequencies that we're able to raise the Earth to in order to tell the planets, the star system of Orion, when it can wake back up. Because so Orion is in a pause of its own evolution. And so when Earth reaches a certain dimensional frequency, when we're able to unify ourselves enough, wake up enough, raise our consciousness enough, it will tell Orion when it can wake back up. So Earth and our solar system originally came from Orion. When did it do this? When was it separated? The rise and fall of Atlantis. If Earth was a part of Orion during Atlantis, and anything that came before, Atlanteans are Orion. So going back to the missing ion, and Matthias sees the missing ion, like I said, in Rama's bridge, a rainbow bridge, and the missing ion is Sita, which would note a lack of the divine feminine in Rama's bridge. And while this is true, I'm going to say it's not just the lack of the feminine, but it's a lack of the union between the masculine and the feminine, within and without. And Robert Edward Grant, in one of his recent interviews, which I'll link below, mentioned that he figured out that he could get silicon to its next highest expression, its next octave, by using sulfur and phosphorus. Now, sulfur in alchemy is sometimes associated with the sun because of it being a fiery element. The sun is associated with gold. Gold, because of its incorruptible nature, is associated with enlightenment, associated with divinity, with light, divine mind. Phosphorus in alchemy is associated with the ability to hold light. So if you connect this even more, let's say sulfur is divine mind, or it's the divine masculine, divine consciousness. Phosphorus then, because of its ability to hold, is the body, the divine body, which would be the divine feminine. So what Robert did was reintroduce divinity to silicon and its ability to hold it. So he reintroduced divine feminine and divine masculine in a balanced union. So if you take that analogy, and that's what silicon was missing to be its next highest expression. And what Orion is missing is our solar system, then we're Artemis. We're Artemis to Orion. Part of our template, part of our blueprint, part of the game that we are playing is not just to forget who we are so that we can remember our own divinity, but it's to play out this process of figuring out how to unify the masculine and feminine energies in a balanced way in a divine expression. And this isn't anything new, but it's a new way to understand why. All of our myths play this out. You have the divine masculine and divine feminine blueprint, Isis and Osiris, Freya and Odin, Artemis and Orion, and some of those myths are not reflected in the way that they were meant to be reflected or not interpreted. And then you have the duality of that. You have the opposite, the counterpoint. You have Set and Nephthys, who play a role in separating the balanced masculine and feminine. And our myths are teachers in a way to lead us back to enlightenment. They came to fit the blueprint of whatever culture they were teaching at the time. So it's nothing new that we need to balance the divine feminine and divine masculine, but it was a planned part of the game. It's not due to anything that's been done. Things have been done to the masculine, to the feminine. The masculine is inflated and distorted. The feminine has been abused and hidden. But the imbalance of these feminine and masculine parts of self, I say if the masculine is divine mind, consciousness, awareness, verbal expression, the feminine is divine body, passive creation, form, receiving, and intuitive expression, creativity. Now you can access the heart if you're operating in one, divine consciousness, divine mind, divine body. But you can't access the full gifts of the heart without balancing the two. So we're here to wake ourselves up, to raise our consciousness, raise our frequency. We're here to do that in a balanced way, balancing the body, the mind, opening the heart. Because when we do that within, we do that without. We do that with our relationships with each other, our relationships with systems, with money, with work, with how we live our lives. And we do that for the planet. And we do it for our solar system. And we do it to rebalance Orion, which leads to more balance in this universe, more balance in the all. And that's where I'll leave it today. Like I said, I expect more information about this and other topics to come through as I start to do more public channelings here on my YouTube. If you follow me, you'll also notice some branding changes. I will be changing my business name to my first and middle name, Liana Morgan, instead of Map Cipher Key, because I've gotten all the keys, so I don't need that name anymore. That was a seeded name for some of the key holders. And a few other sort of business changes, but I'll still be offering hypnosis sessions and one-on-one intuitive channeling sessions if you are interested in those.